Hello, my gurus. I want to welcome you to another class. And today we'll be talking about something very interesting. Yeah, something very lovely. We are looking at a very interesting topic, which is titled System Development Life Cycle. I'm talking about the SDLC, System Development Life Cycle. So, what do you mean by System Development Life Cycle? What do you mean by SDLC? It's actually a structured approach that is used in the development of information system. We all know what an information system is. We've talked about this countless times. Okay, we're talking about when we talk about an information system, we're talking about you bringing your ideas, bringing your professionals, bringing your technology, bringing your managerial skills, bringing them into work, combining them together to achieve a particular goal. Okay, now it goes beyond that. Now we are looking at system development life cycle. I said is a structured approach used in the development of an information system. I want to develop an information system. The essence of an information system is to solve a problem. Okay, I want to bring in technical skills. I want to bring in managerial skills. I want to bring in my tech, my ICT gadgets. I want to bring in my application, both hardware and put the hardware and my application software, my system software. I want to combine everything with the skill I have and with the materials I have around me. I want to integrate everything together to solve a particular problem in an organization. But in doing that, all right, we are looking at the structural approach, okay, that is used, all right, in the development of that particular information system. That is what we call system development life cycle. I said the SDLC or the system development life cycle is a structured approach used in the development of an information system. What are those structural approaches I'm going to apply if I want to develop an information system? That's what we are discussing today. Okay, now this encompasses various phases, you understand, that guide the creation, testing, and deployment of that your system. Are we together? Ensuring they meet the need. Are you with me? Ensuring they meet customer expectations and are delivered on time and with and with the normal budget or within the budget. All right. So what are we talking about again? We are looking at system development life cycle, and I said it talks about those structural approaches you use whenever you want to develop an information or system. So we're talking about the phases. These structural approaches are in phases. Okay. So let's talk about them very quickly. All right. So the next thing I'm going to be talking about is, now that we know that system development life cycle talks about those structural approaches, okay, I'm going to apply whenever I want to develop an information system. Okay, so let's look at those structural approaches. All right, we call them the phases. The phases, I want to believe you are paying attention. The phases of system development life cycle. The first phase we're going to be discussing about is planning, otherwise known as the feasibility study. Now, what is the essence of planning? What is the essence of feasibility study, which we are talking about the first phase? The essence is so that you can define the problem. All right, planning and feasibility study helps you to define the problem, determine the project feasibility, as in the possibility of that project, and create a project schedule. That's the first phase. You must know the problem you want to solve. So knowing the problem falls under the first phase, which is known as planning, otherwise known as feasibility study. Now, what are you going to be doing? You need to identify needs. You need to conduct feasibility analysis and outline resources that are required for you to solve that problem. So that is the first phase. I'm going to take it again. I said the first phase of the structural pattern or the structural development of an information system, which we call the SDLC or System Development Life Cycle, all right, is known as planning, or you can still call it feasibility study. It is that stage whereby you need to define the problem. What exactly do you want to do? What is the problem you are planning to solve? Okay, you need to determine the possibility of that project, the feasibility of the project or the project feasibility. You must be able to create a project schedule, have a map, all right, of what you want to do. Then you should be able to identify the needs, all right. Also conduct what we call feasibility analysis, okay, and outline the resources that are needed as far as this problem must be solved. So that's the first phase. We call that planning, otherwise known as feasibility study. The second phase is called system analysis. When we talk about system analysis, which is the second phase of feasibility study, what do we mean? This phase is very important. You gather, you analyze, and you validate information to define system requirements. What do I mean? You collect, you look for data. When you collect those data, what do? You analyze. Now you know your problem. You know the problem you want to solve. Okay? So you gather points, gather ideas, information. And when you gather those information that can help you solve the problem, you take time to critically analyze them. After analyzing them, you validate the information. Do you understand? To define the system was requirements. System requirements is key. Okay, but you need to define your system requirement. This falls under system analysis. What do I mean? You have to learn to evaluate the alternatives you have. You prioritize the requirement, and you prepare a software requirement specification, which we call the SRS document. With the SRS document, there is nothing you cannot do. Okay? All right. That is for the second phase, which is system analysis. I said at this stage, what do? You gather information, you analyze the information, you validate the information to define system requirements, and you evaluate alternatives. You prioritize those requirements and prepare a software requirement towards specification, which we call the SRS document. So that is the second phase. We talked about the first phase, planning, otherwise known as feasibility study. Now we just talked about the second phase, which is system analysis. Now let's talk about the third phase. The third phase talks about system design. How do you want your system to be in terms of the architecture of the system? Okay, design the system architecture, including the application. I'm talking about the software applications now, the network databases, and all the interfaces will be needed to design that system architecture. It's very important. I said in terms of system design, it focuses on the design of the system architecture, including both the software that will drive that architecture. I'm talking about the application software that will drive that architecture. Not just that, also the network and the databases and even the interfaces. All these are very, very key. Okay. Now, what do? You bring in what we call your software requirements and specification, which we call the SRS. You transform the SRS into a logical structure. You create contingency plans and prepare a design document. All right. What do I just say? I said in executing your system design, I said this phase talks about what? The system architecture, the application, okay, the application, the network, which you're going to be using, all the databases you'll be using, and also the interface. And I said in doing this, you must learn to transform your SRC, talking about the software requirement specification, into your SRS, I beg your pardon, into what we call a logical structure. You create a contingency plan. It's very important just in case one plan fails, you fall to another, and prepare a design document. All right, so that's for that. That is on system design. If I'm to take system design again, I said this phase, you design the system architecture. That is for the third phase, which is system design. This is the phase where you design the system architecture, including the application, that's number one. The network you are using, that's number two. The databases involved, that's number three. And the interface involved, okay? I'm talking about your GUI now, your graphical user interface, okay? This is where you prepare them under your system design. All right, that takes us to the fourth phase. Now, what is the fourth phase? The fourth phase is called development. Yes, you've planned, you've carried out feasibility study, you've done your system analysis, you've done your system design. The next is you develop what you've done. You understand? What do I mean by development? In this phase, you implement the design into source code and integrate models. Okay, this is where you write your code. Okay, you implement the design into source code and integrate them into models. I'm talking about coding, all right? I'm talking about programming, like module integration and your initial testing. You understand? You carry out your initial testing, you prepare your design and stuff like that. You work on the coding, the module integration, and you bring them together. You understand? That is what we call development. I said in this phase, the phase 4, implement the design into what we call source code. Source code is that language that needs to be interpreted. You understand? All right? Or it is that language rather that has been interpreted. Object code is the language that needs to be interpreted. Okay? So source code is that program that has already been defined that you can use and execute. You understand? So in terms of stage 4, what do you do? You implement the design into what we call source code and integrate them into models. Okay, so what are we doing? This is where you write your code. All right, you make your model integration and you initialize or initiate your testing. Okay, that's for the stage 4, which is what? Development. That takes us to the next phase, which is stage 5. So what happens in stage 5? Very simple. You test and integrate. You understand? Stage 5 is testing and integration. What are you going to do in this stage? It's very simple. Just ensure that the system meets the requirements and functions correctly. Ensure there are no bugs. Debug everything. Ensure everything is working perfectly. Just ensure that the system meets the requirements and functions correctly. Okay, it meets the need in which you designed it for. So we call that testing and integration. Okay, you perform quality control tests, you integrate with other systems, and you address what any defect you see. You debug any error you see there, correct them. All right, that's for the phase 5, which is testing and integration. That takes us to the next phase, which is stage 6. In this stage, this is where you really use what you've done. All right, you put what you've done into practice. You know what I'm talking about. It's kind of about implementation. Implement that what algorithm. Implement that program, that software, that problem you solve. Put it into practice. See if it will solve what it's designed for. Okay. Implementation talks about deploying the system into its operational environment. You understand? Install the system, train users, and ensure smooth transition. This one is very key. I love this part. I love so this tells you that you've done a perfect job. Implementation phase. You deploy the system into its operational environment. You install the system. You train people how to use it, as in the users involved. Let them know how to use it, and ensure there is a smooth transition. You understand? We call that implementation phase. Then the final phase, which is known as operations and maintenance. This is key. All right. In terms of operation and maintenance, what do? You support the system post deployment. You handle issues and implement what? Updates. This one is also very important. Okay. In this phase, what do I do? It's very simple. Okay. You support the system post deployment, as I said. You handle issues. If there's any issue that comes up, of course, if you are the one involved, you will go to. You're the one that developed that application, okay, and implement what updates. Let them be new updates, you understand? Provide user support, resolve errors, and adapt to new what? Requirements. So these are all the 7 phases of SDLC. The first phase we talked about is planning, otherwise known as feasibility or study. The second phase we talked about system analysis. The third phase we talked about system design. The fourth phase we talked about deployment. The fifth phase we talked about testing and integration. The 6th phase we talked about implementation, and finally the 7th phase we talked about operations and maintenance. That will take us into what we call the importance of SDLC. Why is system development lifecycle so important? Why do we need to go through all the structural developmental phases for us to solve and for us to create an information system? Why do we need to do that? Number 1, quality assurance. Yes, you must ensure that system meets requirements and are reliable. If the problem you are solving, if what your information system cannot meet requirements and is not reliable, then you fail in your system development life cycle phases. So quality assurance is key. You must ensure that that system meets the necessary requirements and are reliable. Very key. Number 2, time and cost management. Ensure that it helps manage project timelines. You understand? Ensure that with what you've done, it can help us save time. That's time and cost management. Helps manage project timeline and budget effectively. It's very, very important. Time and cost management. That's number 2. Number 3 is adaptability. All right, it should be able to allow for adjustment based on changing project needs or customer or feedback. That means whatever you develop must be flexible. It shouldn't be too rigid. In case there is any new development, we can quickly add it into it and go ahead with our work. Okay, so that is all on the importance of system development life cycle. We said number 1 is quality assurance. Number 2 is time and cost management, and number 3 is adaptability. Thank you so much for paying attention. If you have any questions, don't forget to send at the comment section, and I will attend to those questions. So that will be all on system development life cycle. So in our next video, we'll be talking about the methodologies of system development life cycle. Don't forget to like and to share. I remain Brimo Excel. Thank you so much. See you in our next class.